Today we will be reviewing over how to solve simple Mendelian genetics problems. These will include incomplete dominance, monohybrid cross, dihybrid cross, sex-linked characteristics, and multiple alleles. Here we have our first genetics problem. In dogs, wire hair is due to a dominant gene, W. Smooth hair is due to its recessive allele, little w. The first thing we want to do when we have a genetics problem is to set up a key. Now in this case, our key is going to be big W is wire hair. So in order to be wire hair, we would have big W, or we could have big W, little w. The only way to be smooth hair would to be little w. Now in this problem, we have a homozygous wire-haired dog mated with a smooth-haired dog. What type of offsprings could be produced? Remember that homozygous for our wire hair is going to be big W. The gamete it can give would be a big W or a big W. We're going to cross that with a smooth hair, which is little w. The possible gametes it can give is a little w or a little w. Now we're going to take this and set this up in a Punnett square. This Punnett square is our box to the side. Notice that we have our big W's on our gametes across the top, our little w's for our gametes across the side. And when we fill this in, we always want to write our dominant first. We're going to bring W down, and then we write our recessive second. Now we do this because it's easier to read. So again, we'll bring our big W, and when we bring that big W down, and then we'll bring the little w across. We come over here, we bring our big W down, our little w across, our big W down, and our little w across. Make sure that when your capital letters and your lowercase letters look very similar, that you do something to tell the difference. So you'll see the little curly tail I put on my little w so that I can tell the difference between the capital and the lowercase. When I do this, I will notice that I have right here, I've got a heterozygous wired hair, heterozygous wired hair, heterozygous wired hair, heterozygous wired hair. So all of these would be wired-haired pups. And so here we have the results. And you'll notice that looking at this, we have all heterozygous big W, little w. And we call those offsprings our F1 or our first generation. Now sometimes a genetics problem will ask us to take two of our F1 generation and to cross them to get the next generation. That generation is known as the F2. That's exactly what this problem does. It says what type of offsprings could be produced in the F2 generation. So what we do is we're going to take our F1s, which were big W, little w, and we're going to cross these and we're going to see what the next generation offspring look like. So we took our big W, little w, and we crossed that with a big W, little w. And we'll notice that this first one, our gametes would be a big W or a little w, and we're placing those right there on our Punnett square. And then with our next ones, we have a big W and a little w, and we're going to place those right there on our Punnett square. Now again, we're going to bring down and over, so we have big W, big W. We're going to bring down and over. We still like to write our big W first. Down and over, down and over. Now when we look at this, we're going to be looking at a genotype and a phenotype ratios. With our phenotype ratios, what we're looking at is, are they wired-haired or are they smooth-haired? And so what we see is that we have three that are going to be wire hair, and we have one that is smooth. When we look at our genotype ratios, what we're looking at is the actual letters. So we have one where we have big W, we have two where we have big W, and we have one where we have little w, little w. Now, genetics problems deal with probability. So we have the two wire-haired dogs that are mated, and when they looked at the offsprings, the first litter they had a smooth-haired puppy. And what that tells us with the smooth-haired puppy is that our parents needed to be big W, little w. And we needed that because if we had big W crossed with big W, we would not have a smooth hair. If we had big W crossed with big little, we would still not have a smooth hair. And so the only way we could have a smooth-haired puppy would be if both parents were heterozygous. Now, if these two dogs mated again, what is the chance that they would produce another smooth-haired puppy? Well, we know that from our previous slide that they would have a 1 out of 4 puppies being smooth-haired. What is the chance that it would be wired-haired? They would be 3 out of 4. You can do these as percentages and say you had 75% and 25%. Now here we have those previous problems worked out so that you can see. So again, our 1 and 4 was a result from right here. And so we would have 1/4 or 25%. And then these right here would be our 3/4 or 75% for wired hair. Now here we have a wired-haired male is mated with a smooth-haired female. We know the smooth-haired female would be little w, little w. Now with a wired-haired male, we don't know if it's homozygous or heterozygous, but we do know that it is a big W, so it's a big W something. Now it said that the mother of the wired-haired was a smooth-haired. What that tells us is that wired-haired dog was heterozygous. So what are the phenotypes and genotypes of the pups that they could produce? And what would the results be? Well, let's look at these on the next slide. And here we have our heterozygous wired-haired dog crossed with our smooth-haired. And when we look at our Punnett square, we would have 2 that would be wired-haired and 2 that would be smooth-haired, and we can reduce that to a 2-to-2 reduced to a 1-to-1 ratio. With our genotypes, we have 2 that are big W, little w, and we have 2 that are little w, little w. Again, it can be reduced to a 1-to-1 ratio. In our second type of genetics problem, we will be looking at a trait that is known as incomplete dominance. Now, in an incomplete dominance problem, the heterozygous state will be different from the homozygous traits. A classic example is in snapdragons. Now, big R is red and little r is white, but the big R, little r state gives pink flowers. So the only way to have red flowers is to be big R, big R. The only way to have white flowers would be little r, and pink would be the heterozygous big R, little r. Now, in order to do a incomplete dominance problem, the problem must state that it is incomplete dominance, or it must state what the heterozygous condition is. You are not expected to have all of these different conditions memorized. So, a red flower plant is crossed with a white flowered plant. What are the genotypes and the phenotypes of these plants? Well, let's see what we would have on the next slide. Well, we've got our red plant right here with our gametes big R or big R. We have our white plant right here with our gametes little r, little r. Again, we fill this in by bringing down and over, so big R, little r, down and over, and we would see we would have 100% pink plants, 100% heterozygous big R, little r. Now notice that the phenotype and the genotype are the same. This is always true on incomplete dominance problems. So what would happen if we were to take two pink flowers and we were to cross these? Well, let's see the results on the next slide. Well, we've taken the gametes for our first one, big R and a little r, and our gametes for our second one, a big R, little r. We've filled in our components and notice that we would have one that is red, two that are pink, and one that is white. So we would have a 1-to-1 phenotypic ratio where we have one red, two pink, one white. Our genotypic ratio would also be a 1-to-1 ratio. One big R, two big R, one little r, little r. And this is always the case. Again, phenotypic ratio and genotypic ratios are always the same on incomplete dominance.